Hello, Daphne here with another video for you. This is a story about how two puppy dogs came to meet and how they introduced us to our father-to-be. Now, I know that sounds a little confusing, so I will back up. After my father died tragically of a stroke in California, my mother returned to the East, which is where she was from and where all her friends and the remainder of our family lived, including her mother. We moved to Georgetown in Washington, D.C., and before my father died, he had given us, my twin sister and me, this precious little chocolate-colored dachshund. We named him Gadget. Why Gadget? Because there was a little girl down the street, Dachshund, named Trinket. So Gadget and Trinket became great friends. So anyway, that was the last gift from my father. And when we moved back east, of course, Gadget came with us. We were living in Georgetown, and close to our house was the Montrose Park. And my twin sister and I would go in the afternoons and bring Gadget for a walk up to the park. We always enjoyed those walks into the park, a beautiful, beautiful part of Georgetown. Well, anyway, along comes this darling French Poodle named Gigi and her daddy. And Gadget and Gigi seemed to get along, and we would talk to Gigi's father and have a great old time. And we'd see him quite often up at Montrose Park. We'd have Gadget and he'd have Gigi, and what always amused us was Gadget, that little tiny sausage dog. If any big, huge Great Dane came up to Gigi to sniff her, Gadget would bark like mad, his hair would stand on end, and in 2 seconds that Great Dane would be gone. So anyway, let me go back even further. Our father-to-be was a graduate of Princeton University. Here he is on Lake Carnegie. He was part of the Princeton crew. It sort of reminded me when I came across this picture of the famous and wonderful book. If you haven't read it, you definitely should. Boys in the Boat, about the triumphant University of Washington team that beat all of Hitler's boats in rowing races in the 1936 Olympics. Anyway, my about-to-be father was a colonel in the Air Force. He was also an avid rider. He loved polo, and he loved hunting and jumping. He had done that ever since he was a little boy. One day, my mother came to my twin sister and me, and she said, "You two are required to be on your very, very best behavior tonight, because I am bringing over the man that I will marry." So Bev and I prepared for this meeting of our, stepfather-to-be, and we were dressed to the nines and polite as we could be, and my mother comes into the house and says, "Daphne, I want you to meet Paul Barringer." And my twin sister and I looked at my mother and we said, "We know him." Well, she was absolutely taken back with surprise, but it was the truth, and the story came out about how we had met often and enjoyed each other's company up at Montrose Park. When it came time to, or I should say after he asked my mother to marry him and was pretty sure she was going to say yes, he took us out horseback riding to ask us if we would agree and if we would approve of his marrying our mother. We resoundingly said yes, and a year later they were married, and here they are at their wedding. Oh gosh, what a striking and wonderful couple they made. Soon after they were married, because my real father had died, Mother's husband, Paul Barringer, adopted my twin sister and me. And we changed our names, and he was like our real father because we really didn't know our, our biological father. And he was absolutely the most wonderful man. My grandmother used to always say to my mother, "You are the luckiest woman in the world to have married two men who were so fabulous and so devoted to you." And then she would snip, "And you don't deserve it." We always got a kick out of that remark. So these two got married. My adoptive father was in the State Department in Washington at the time. He was a diplomat. And I remember him saying that one of the things that he wanted to do was travel and live overseas. So soon after they were married, he became a Foreign Service officer. And their very first assignment was Port-au-Prince, Haiti. And here's my father sitting on a log in Jacmel, Haiti. And I'm telling you, I know Haiti gets a bad rap, but we absolutely loved Haiti. We loved the people of Haiti. My father did as much as he possibly could for this very, very poor nation. But our time in Haiti was really special. And we never would have gotten to know it so well if he hadn't been stationed there. Okay, so from there, he went to Tripoli, Libya. And Tripoli in those days had two capitals, one in Benghazi and one in Tripoli. This was the summer that we were in Benghazi, and that's me with my father entering a Russian vessel for a diplomatic reception of some sort. Oh my goodness. We were in those days, my twin sister and I were dragged to these receptions, which we didn't like too much. But in retrospect, I wish that I had been more attentive and more understanding of what historic experiences I was having overseas. I love this picture of my father. Here he is playing polo on the sandy ground in Benghazi, Libya. And that was always a hoot to watch him play polo, which he absolutely loved. And of course, my parents took us all over the world. Here is a picture of one of our trips to Europe where we're on a gondola ride in Venice. We went all over the place with my parents. And it was absolutely amazing how many places we got to see as young people. And my only regret, as I said before, was that I didn't take it more seriously or understand what an enormous privilege it was to see so much of the world. After my father retired from the Foreign Service, he and my mother moved back to Princeton, New Jersey. My father had graduated from Princeton in the class of 1924. Here's a picture of him at the annual Princeton P Raid for alumni with his class of 1924 hat. What a wonderful, wonderful man he is, or was, I should say. Oh, he lived a remarkable life, absolutely remarkable life. When I had my own kids, they absolutely loved going into his workshop in the basement of their house in Princeton. And they would spend hours together, absolutely hours together down there, where my father would show them how to use a electric drill, and they'd put pieces of wood together. And to this day, my children look back on those special times with their grandfather as being among the highlights of their childhood. Here's another picture of my mother and father after another Princeton P Raid. And here they are in their later years, and they've both long passed away, but they were quite a pair. Everybody loved them. They were fun-loving. My father was just as bright as he could be and charming, all the women loved him. And I always got such a kick out of how complimentary he was to all the beautiful women, although he was never far from his devotion to my mother. Theirs was a love affair extraordinaire, I should say. So that is the story about Gadget and Gigi and how they came to introduce us to our future adoptive father, who was such a special and unique and wonderful man, and how fortunate I feel to have had not only an amazing biological father, but an adoptive father who loved and adored me as if I was his very own. And I can tell you one thing for sure, I adored him right back, and then some. And the last thing I have to say is that I miss both my mother and father something terrible. So many times I want to ask them a question about one of their trips or where they've been and places I've been that they had already gone. And of course, those opportunities are all gone. But may those two wonderful people rest in peace. And thank you so much to those parents for giving me so much.